Training camp can be a very confusing time for a lot of fans because just a lot's going on, right? Between all of the practices, some that you can see, some that you can't, some joint practices. There's different types of practices in between here, padded, non-padded. Injuries, right, are really hard to track during the training camp because we don't get that injury report every week. And also, because some injuries are meant to be taken seriously and some injuries are kind of just meant to keep guys out of full contact drills and not necessarily an indication of what they would be or what their status would be come game day. So all of this stuff, it's just really hard to follow preseason games, who's going to play here or there. It's been a difficult thing to kind of follow this year, especially with all the changes with the 17th game that has been added. So what I wanted to do was put it all in one place and kind of give you my overview of what has happened so far in camp, what changes you can expect from this 2021 Browns team because of camp about 3/4 of the way through. So that's what we're going to do today. But before I do that, I want to make sure you guys hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, ding that notification bell. Live streams are coming this year. Watch-alongs like I did for the preseason are coming for all 17 regular season games. I pretty much guarantee it at this point. And then also a post-game show for most of the games this year. So if that sounds like fun, if you have fun with the live streams, if you have fun with the post-game shows, the watch-alongs, whatever one you like, make sure you subscribe. Make sure you hit that notification bell because on top of all that, I'm going to be delivering a ton of content on the day-to-day basis during the football season. So if that sounds like fun to you, make sure you subscribe. Make sure you're notified. Also, want to give a shout out to the patreon.com dog check tier members that help this show be what it is now. And I'm going to start with Michael Mateek, Michael Morales, Mark Kahn, Max Haymaker, Drake, Nick Merrick, Mike Labra, Wes and Megan, DA, and Jay, Greg Ehlers, Austin Bolin, Easley Bash, Joe Hart, Gabriel Wilson, Fred Pratt III, David Valtiara, Relentless Buck, Chunt, Rex Kaufman, Kevin Johnston, Cleveland Cart, Matt H, Sign Sheets, Gemini, Lewin Freeman, Fight Dirty 74, Yo-Yo, Matt Lloyd, Paul Wilcox, Hundo Magnifico, Kyle Stouffer, Lukey from Munich, Deveroff, J Guy 101, Musty Taco, Joe Bobby, Brad Cowboy, Dylan W, James McGinley, Arendal, Chad Gimme, David Maldonado, Dylan Hill, Josh Bendor, Jaleel Salim Jr., Mark M, Stuart Moore, Cleveland BCI, Robert Jermaine Jr., Dave Mike May, Andrew Hirsch, Curtis Bear, Batman, Barack Kumar, John Albert, Beerman069, Masayua Buzzer, Roland James Nemo, Mac House, Reeve Hertz, Philip Wilcox, and Marie River, Sean Barron, Gagos Pisano, Corporal Nick Lopez, Dom Gazzola, Nick Nasty, Ian Whitaker, Colin 216, Christian, Dave Strong, Michael Stone, Billy Moose Gentry, Austin Z, Mark Burnett II, Andre Griffin, Otis Wolf, Dog Pound Kai, Lydia, Jesus Serrano, Alexander Davis, Chris Phones, Picktown Browns backer, Max Nilikenko, Mark Khan, Max Aldojo, and Water Bear Marketing. Again, guys, thank you so much for that support. You really are instrumental in this show being able to be what it is so far. So again, guys, thank you for that. Now let's talk about training camp so far. So when you talk about the training camp changes, the one thing you always have to keep an eye on and the one thing you dread during this point of the year is injuries, right? A lot of teams have had their seasons ruined already by injuries. So you always want to keep an eye out. Fortunately for the Browns, although they have had some interesting injuries here or there, they haven't had any injuries, knock on wood, of anybody you would consider a starting caliber player or a major contributor. You have some guys for the future that aren't going to be playing here this year, but nobody that would deeply concern you or is on the level of one of those upper echelon starter guys. You did lose Jacob Phillips. He's out for the season. He's going to get surgery. He will not play this year. Montrell Meander seems to have some kind of Achilles issue. He probably won't play this year. He was more of a special teams guy. And speaking of special teams, Cody Parkey landed on the IR and got cut. He's not going to be on the Browns this year, or at least it looks like, at least not at the beginning of the season. His replacement will be Chase McLaughlin. I don't know if that is going to be their main solution for kicker. You guys know where I'm at with kickers at this point. I really don't care what you can do about the fancy stuff, right? I don't care if you can make a 50-yard field goal. I don't care if you have 60-yarder range. I don't care about any of that. I care about extra point consistency, and that's pretty much about it, right? When you have the offense the Cleveland Browns are expected to have this year, I don't think that we should be going to the kicker very often anyways, if we're executing that offense correctly. So, that being said, If the guy can just make the extra points, I think we're good. If he can make the 40-yard field goal, I think we're good. Anything out of that, I'm not expecting from a kicker. So hopefully they can find it. Hopefully this guy can be consistent. I understand why they did it here, right? Cody's not going to be on the team to start the year. It makes no sense to keep him on the roster right now. So that makes a ton of sense. I wish he didn't get hurt because he does have a ton of experience kicking at First Energy Stadium, and I do think that matters. But nonetheless, they're going to have to go with Chase McLaughlin or get somebody off of free agency. But at this point, no Cody Parkey for the Cleveland Browns. He has been cut. Robert Jackson, also somebody who was on this team last year, kind of a practice squad corner, got picked on by the Pittsburgh Steelers when he played them back-to-back games. So, no surprise there that he got cut. He was having a really, really rough training camp and an even rougher preseason. So we saw where the arrow was going. Unfortunate for him. Hopefully he bounces back, but he's also been cut. Now I'm going to talk about some of the rookies that the Browns have drafted, what they have looked like so far. We have already talked about at length. JOK had an excellent first game. Second game, he got some play with not the ones, but the twos, because the Browns didn't have their ones out there. They had the twos out there, and he did start technically, but he was with the twos. And he looked okay. Didn't look as great as he did the first game, but I don't know if that's just because they didn't let him kind of roam around and do his thing in the second one. I don't know what the reason was for him not looking as good, but he did not look as good. So we'll see what he does here in week 3 if he does play. He did get a ton of stitches in his head because of something that happened with the weight bar. From my experience in lifting weights, sometimes, you're on the shoulder press or you're on the bench press, and you kind of instinctively sit up and you just smack your head into it and you get a bad break because it's a lot of texture on the bar. Sometimes you can get a bad break and get a bad cut that way. So hopefully that's it. I hope the bar didn't crash on his head because, oh my goodness, that would be terrifying. But it doesn't sound like anything that major. It sounds like it was kind of a minor incident, just a lot of blood. He got some stitches. He might play on Sunday. He might not. But hopefully we get to see more of him because I would like to see more of him. Other than that, just a ton of soft tissue injuries with the team. A bunch of guys in and out with soft tissue injuries. Anthony Schwartz has not really been able to do anything when it comes to team drills all preseason or even just like training camp, just because he's just been out for so many days. Same thing with Tony Fields. Haven't been able to really see him that much. As far as the rookies you have seen, I think Greg Newsome has put in some good work. I think he put in especially good work last week in the preseason game. I think he put in some good work in the joint practices versus the New York Giants. So I'm all in with Greg Newsome probably being the starter. Greedy Williams had another hamstring injury, so we'll see what he's on. I don't think it was a major one because, again, he wasn't getting worked on the sidelines when he was taken out of the game. So I don't think it was major, but, it's enough of a setback when Greg Newsome's on your heels as much as he is, and he's had 2 better games than Greedy has had so far. So, that kind of is what it is for Greedy Williams. Hopefully he can find a way to get out there. Would love to see him get out there, but as of right now, it doesn't look like he's going to start. And overall, I think the Browns have looked pretty good, especially offensively. Defensively, it's hard to glean, but offensively, they have looked good. They have looked crisp. They look like they know what they're doing. They look like they have kind of executed this offense well. They're going to add more wrinkles that we're just not going to see in camp or in the preseason, but they have looked really good, even with the second unit, right? When they're able to do their thing, they're in rhythm, even with subpar players or non-starting players, they're able to move the ball, even with Case Keenum out there dinking and dunking, which has been a little bit of a storyline. Case Keenum just hasn't had a great preseason. He's been pretty awful, actually. And then when you look at Odell and Jarvis, I think they have looked great for what we have seen of them so far in camp. Jarvis especially looks great. He looks 100% back from that hip injury. Odell looks really good. He hasn't really done a ton of team drills. I think that's by design. I think they're just going to put him in bubble wrap until the season starts because he's a veteran at this point. He kind of knows how to do things. Do want to get that chemistry with him and Baker kind of settled before the season starts, but maybe they'll do that in the week in between because, again, that doesn't require a ton of contact. And overall, honestly, this offense just looks like it's exploding at the seams with options. You got guys like David Njoku, Harrison Bryant, and Austin Hooper. And then you got Odell, Jarvis behind them, Donovan Peoples-Jones, and Rashard Higgins, who have looked excellent in camp so far. I mean, you would almost be fine with them being your starting options if you didn't have Odell and Jarvis. So you feel really good about the depth there. We know what the depth is at running back. They can't stop producing productive running backs, or at least running backs who can have good games in the preseason, because we know what Kareem Hunt can do. We know what Nick Chubb can do. Dearness Johnson showed something last year. And then you got guys like John Kelly showing up, Demetric Felton, who has looked great so far in camp, showing up really strong, both as a running back and as a wide receiver. So you have depth out the wazoo with running back and a wide receiver, which is excellent. Offensive line, I think, Drew Forbes has had a good showing for himself. In some cases, you could say Michael Dunn has also had a good showing for himself. You would say Kobe Gossett has had a good camp so far. Unfortunately, one of the linemen who has not had a good camp is James Hudson. It's been a little bit of a rough one, right? I don't know how his camp has went because it's hard to kind of glean that from where I have to view things. But as far as preseason goes, it hasn't been the greatest for him. Now, that's honestly fine for an offensive lineman. We have talked about this before. It usually takes offensive linemen like 3 years to get to where they need to be, to a point to where they can start if they're not like first round cream of the crop guys. And even if that's the case, sometimes it takes him 3 years, right? But yeah, it's going to take him 3 years. He's going to be a 3-year down the line project. I don't think this is a guy who's going to be ready next year. He's had a little bit of a rough start. He's learning the ins and out of being an offensive tackle in the NFL, and he's making a jump from Cincinnati to the NFL. So we know that that's going to probably take a little bit of time, and it looks like it's going to take some time. So a little bit of a rough start there for James Hudson. The good news is that we're not asking him to start anytime soon, right? Jack Conklin's contract is still like 2 years on it. So he has the time to get better, and by the time Jack Conklin's contract is up, that'll be his 3rd year. That's usually when offensive linemen start to be ready for the NFL. A little bit of an adjustment period there. It doesn't look like he's going to be an exception. So that's all there. But speaking of people trying to develop and blossom into something in their 3rd year, Jordan Elliott has had a pretty good preseason so far. He had a lackluster camp coming into the preseason games, but since the preseason games, he has had a couple of good games back to back here. I really like what I'm seeing out of him. I'm at this point, with what I have been disappointed of with Andrew Billings, I kind of want to see Jordan Elliott play with the ones with Malik Jackson at some point, just to see if he can kind of be more efficient in plugging some of these run holes. And then you can also have the added dimension of him being a pass rusher on that defensive line. I think that's going to be real interesting. It looks like he's developing. He looks like he's growing. Looks like he might be ready a little bit sooner than what I assumed for him, especially at the beginning of camp. So that's really good news to see Jordan Elliott playing well. The bad news is that Billings hasn't looked great, and overall the interior defensive line, the starting units that they have put out there just haven't looked great. I mean, we have been down to like Sheldon Day being one of the saviors of the defensive line, or the interior defensive line. Let me be more specific, because just the play by Andrew Billings, who is projected to be a starter, just has not been at the level that you would have hoped it would have been, and certainly not at a higher level than like even what Larry Ogunjobi was putting in there. But let's go from one guy who's been a little bit of a disappointment throughout camp to somebody who has been exceeding expectations, even though he had pretty high expectations coming into camp. Donovan Peoples-Jones. The hype is real on him. Every opportunity he has gotten to showcase his talent, he has done so. He only got 1 target in the preseason game. He is at the point to where they're going to limit his snaps in the preseason, because he is going to be a valuable part of this offense. And I think the coaching staff sees it. So he only gets like a drive or 2 now. But in that joint practice, he was excellent against a good coverage unit in the New York Giants. He was really good against the Jacksonville Jaguars, number one defense. So that's another feather in his cap. He looks pretty good, to be honest with you. He looks like, after this year, you're going to have flexibility with what you can do with the wide receiver position. He looks like he's going to be ready for more targets at the beginning of the year. And again, another guy that can add to a dynamic threat on offense, which is exactly what you want with this team. And again, you just look at the options that this offense has. You know, it's a real fortunate position for Baker Mayfield to be in, and I think this offense can really put up some great numbers. Now, speaking of a key piece on the defense, JOK, again, we mentioned he looked great in that first game. He has been moving up the depth charts. I don't think that's anything to worry about. I think at the very least they're going to have some blitz packages for JOK, and they're going to really scheme him up into different things. I don't think we're going to remotely see how they're going to use JOK, but how they're using him in the preseason. So I think more is to come once the season starts with him, because it's obvious when you watch him on the field, he's going to be used. He would be a waste on the bench. So we're going to see some JOK at some point during this season, definitely, and I'm excited for that. But that's kind of the update on camp. Let me know if there's anything I missed down in the comment section below. But again, guys, thank you for watching. Have a great day. Have a good night.